You know, what's crazy is that one of the things that the first thing that a man has to do in order to start to become free of pornography is change his thinking. Like, he has to realize that pornography isn't the problem. I know that's a weird thing to say, and I get it because, like, when I first went to a recovery meeting so many years ago, my thought was, look, if I can just nip this problem in the bud, this is really the only thing wrong with my life. This is the only thing robbing me of the certainty and the power and the fulfillment and the joy that I want. This is the thorn in my flesh. And so I came down the street and I pulled into this parking lot and I parked right there because it was behind the wall and I didn't want anybody to see me just in case they recognized me. I hoped actually that there were no cars in the parking lot, but there were. And I had committed myself that if there was someone there, I'd go in. So I got out of the car and I walked down this sidewalk and I headed toward this building here. And as I was walking, of course, my heart started thumping. I was scanning to see if there was anybody that I recognized. And my hands started shaking a little bit and I went in this door, grabbed the handle and went inside. And as I went in, I didn't want to admit to anybody that I was here looking for a meeting for men who had a porn problem. And so I stepped halfway in the door and paused, hesitating. My mouth was like half open and my heart was thumping inside my chest and my legs were kind of quaking and there was this tingling inside my legs. And, you know, I was kind of lightheaded and I could barely breathe and I didn't know what to do. And there was this awkward silence as the man up front was looking at me, until he finally just nodded his head and said, "You're in the right place, go have a seat." Like he knew. And so I stumbled in and I went and found a seat. And I sat down. And there I sat for the next hour as I listened to man after man after man. And the thing is, these were decent men. Men that were trying to at least be honest with themselves, men that were trying to live a good life. They weren't the deviants and the sex offenders that I thought attended these meetings. And they shared their own story. And their own story had the exact same struggles I had been dealing with for years. Like, all of us had lain in bed for countless nights with tears rolling down our faces and landing in our ears because of the weight of the shame and the guilt and the remorse. We had each fallen to our knees to pray to God, praying for some kind of forgiveness, and then found comfort, but then got up and then, like, the next day or the next week or month or maybe a couple months down the road, we'd gone back to porn. And then we were like, crap, well, I repented, but then I did it again, so the former sins return, and now I'm worse off than I was before. And there was that sense of despair and hopelessness. And then there were all the broken promises we had all made to ourselves and to our wives, all the visits to bishops or pastors or ministers, hoping for some kind of guidance and some kind of help. But all they ever said was, you know, you're a good man, your sins are forgiven, don't do it again. And so then we had gone to look for coaching programs. And we had gone for asking for priesthood blessings. We had sought for therapists and counselors, all of us only to end right back into this same room looking for help because nothing was working. And so as I sat there that night, just taking this in, and this reality was washing over me, and I wasn't comprehending all of it. I wasn't noticing some of the patterns that even were present that night. I remember just this one thing stuck out to me, and that was that for the very first time since I was a teenager, the burden of guilt and shame that I had just been wearing finally started to shift. And it didn't shift because this program was the final answer. It wasn't. I still had to search for many years and work with other coaches and other training programs until I found the right set of tools to liberate a man, this man, and the men that I'm working with, from the clutches of addiction for good. But see, that night, the burden started to shift because I finally understood that I wasn't alone. I mean, I knew that it was a big problem. I knew it in my head. But that night, I felt it. I wasn't alone. And it finally allowed me to have the courage to finally say in front of other people, my name is Bob, and I'm addicted to pornography. Brother, I know what it's like to feel like you're alone. And I know that there are times when you feel like it's a hopeless cause and it's not even worth fighting. Or to feel like maybe I'll get it later, or I could just put it off for now. But I can tell you from the other side, you're not alone. I can tell you not only that you're not alone, but that there's a way out, and that there's a way to live on power, like with power and on purpose, in a way that is untouched by pornography or addiction. Even if you've tried and failed over and over and over and over again for years to break free. But in order to do that, you and I have to think differently. We have to approach living each day differently. We have to wake up differently in the morning. And I don't mean the kind of one day at a time thing. We have to think in a whole new way about life. And we kept to think differently than I thought that night in this room. See, because in this room, I felt relieved. I got up from that meeting and like the weight had fallen off me, and I felt light and I felt alive, and I'd had this emotional, spiritual experience, and I walked out and I headed to my car and I was on my way there, and I just felt like, yes, this is it. This is finally it. I'm going to be free from pornography. We're going to start to live the life that I've always wanted to live, the life that I'm meant for and I was headed for. I thought I'd found the answer when in reality I'd only found one piece. I kept struggling for years. No. At that point, I only kept struggling for months. But I kept going to meetings because they felt good. And in the process, I started to notice that the men in the room weren't getting any better. And I almost wanted to give up to this idea that they kept spouting, which was that I would be an addict for the rest of my life, and the best that I could hope for was to manage it. That I wanted to give up and give in to this idea, but some part of me refused to allow that to be the truth of my life. Not only because I believe in a God that is all-powerful, that He has the capacity to completely heal a man from all wounds, including addiction, but because I believe my life was meant for something bigger than to spend the rest of it focusing on not looking at porn. And so, as my relentless search continued, I finally discovered the reason why all those other programs weren't working. And it starts with the truth that porn is not the problem. Pornography was the solution that you and I have come to solve a much bigger problem. And the reason we keep going back to it is because it works. It works better than a lot of the other stuff we've tried. You see, as a man, you and I, we go through life and we have our kids yammering at us, or the pets that need our attention, or the chores around the house. Maybe your wife's mad at you, or your girlfriend, or maybe you're just not attracted to her at that point in time. Maybe it's that time of the month and you would just rather be away. Or maybe you're craving some other kind of sexual experience, or you're hoping to be accepted for who you are. Or you just want someone to listen to you. And there's the feelings of worthlessness. But on top of that, life throws at you bills, and there's projects at work, and there's all of the other things that we have to cope with on a day-to-day basis. Driving here and there, traffic, and scheduled events, and everything that we juggle. And in that process, we're seeking for a way to eliminate the stress and relieve ourselves from all of the problems that it's causing in us. We want to live a life that at least has some modicum of pleasure and comfort, rather than living this life that is difficult to live. And so our answer was pornography. Maybe not at first, but eventually we landed there. And you see, some of us were sexually abused as children. To have essentially what was a giant back then come and violate us in a way that was so personal that we had to deal with the victimization and the violation and the confusion and the guilt and the shame in some way. And some of us were just injured. And we used to be athletes, but now we can't do that anymore. And we're frustrated with life. And some of us are just dealing with diseases, or life is just uncomfortable for a whole other kind of reason. And so in order to escape, in order to mask the pain, in order to find some distraction that allows us for once not to have to look at that, we sought some way of sedating, some way of helping ourselves out. And the Band-Aid that you and I found was pornography. Some people go to adrenaline and they become adrenaline junkies. Some people go to food. Some people go to video games. Some people go to drugs and alcohol. There's all kinds of ways that we sedate, and you and I found pornography. And the crazy part is that once that high has finally worn off, once we've had our moment of feeling wanted, once we've had our moment of intense physical pleasure that allows us to feel alive again, once we've had our moment of feeling like we're in control, we get to click on which video we want to click on and fantasize about the women that we want to fantasize about. Once we've had our moment of excitement knowing that this is forbidden activity and we're getting away with it, we come back down and we still have the same problems that we had before. On top of them, added guilt and added shame because of what we just did. And that's too much to bear, and so some of us went right back to porn. And what's crazy is that we didn't see, and you don't see now, even though you think you do, that outside of that amount of pain, there is at least 10 times as much damage that is invisible to you in your life. In the relationships you have with your family, with your wife, with your kids, with yourself, with God and your faith, all of that undermined by your decision to deal with stress by way of pornography. And that's why the other programs don't work. They helped me to admit that I had a problem. They helped me to start to come to terms with what I'd done in the past and to start to mend my relationship with God in a way that I felt like I could at least connect with Him in some way. But they didn't teach me how to permanently erase decades of images from my mind so that they never came back to haunt me. I had to figure that one out on my own. They didn't teach me how to rebuild my relationship with my wife, starting from the place of addiction and betrayal and live chat rooms, and for some of us even cheating, to build it up to the place of power and fulfillment. They didn't teach me how to heal my kids from the damage I'd done to them because of who I was and to build a relationship with them. They didn't teach me how to not just feel good with God, but to actually get direct, specific, practical advice on a daily basis directly from Him for my life. Guidance. They didn't teach me any of that. They didn't even teach me how to tune into my body and understand what it really needed, and to give me the tools to be able to manage stress in such a way that it didn't tear me down, but actually enabled me to build my life up. But all of those things are what a man needs in order to be completely free from pornography. He has to be able to release the past. He has to be able to re-engage with himself in the present. He has to be able to rebuild the relationships with the people that matter in his life. And he has to be able also to rediscover the purpose for which he wants to live. It has nothing to do with not looking at porn, but everything to do with what makes his life happy and fulfilled. Those are the steps. And that's the process I take these men through as we go through the phases of addiction, way down here in the pit, as we climb up this mountain peak to healing, and many men stop there. And some of them just set up a residence there and they look down on the valley below, happy that they conquered that climb. But that is not the point of your life. Baseline, zero, back where you came from, that's not why you're here on earth. You came to live for something, and that's another peak. And you conquer that peak by the habits that you built down here. Down here in the pit of addiction, you build certain habits with certain tools that enable you to engage with every facet of your life so that you can easily surpass healing and work your way to a life of meaning and purpose. Now, some of you listening, you're going to hear this and you're going to say, that's a lot of work. It's not worth it. And I get it. I know, like, if I had known how much work it was when I started, if I had known about the tens of thousands of dollars that I would spend, if I had known about the nights that I'd spent working on things and the number of coaches I would have to go to, I probably would have quit in the beginning. But you don't have to do that. I already did it. But if you still think it's too much work, then I'd invite you to just don't torture yourself anymore. Just stop watching this video and go back to the life that you already have. Continue doing what you're doing, knowing that it won't change your life because what you're doing now is giving you the life you're experiencing. But don't torture yourself anymore by hearing about the possibility of living a life like the one I get to experience. a life with a wife who's so deeply connected to me that I get to feel completely 100% accepted for who I am without anything to hide. That we are sexually and emotionally and romantically and in a way of friendship connected in ways that I could never have imagined years ago, that I couldn't even dream about when I was a kid. Is it worth it to have that? Is it worth it to be able to stand as a father or as a friend, as a leader, to be able to guide people to a place where, and empower them to a place of being able to handle their own lives? Not because you know something, but because you are something and you know you have nothing to hide. Is it worth it to be able simply to walk into a room and not be afraid that you're going to run into a piece of technology that's going to show you a picture of pornography, which is rampant around the world, and be afraid that that is going to drag you back down to the pit? Is it worth it to be able to live a life completely liberated? Not just liberated from pornography, but liberated to be able to do the thing that you were born to be able to do. And so if that's you, and you feel it in your heart, this calling, this opportunity, then all you have to do is click on the button. We'll get on the phone, and I'll take you through an assessment where you learn. We look at your life, and I'll tell you the things in your life that are working, and we'll want to keep those. And the things that aren't working, well, we'll give you some things that you can do to help to build those tools so that you can really work through not just healing, but all the way to power and purpose. Because right at this moment, there's a door in front of you. And you don't have to come through this door and go through those meetings that I went through. But if you want to be free of addiction, you've got to go through a door. You've got to summon the courage that it takes to let your heart thump in your chest, to let your hands shake a little bit, to worry about how it's going to turn out. And to grab the handle, open the door, and step through to a whole new life. And that door is on the other side of this page. All you have to do is click the button below, and we'll get started.